Okay, so hello and welcome to the next in the series of conversations organised by the Centre of Sport and Events at University of the West of Scotland. So CCSE is a partnership with UWS and Renfrewshire Council, and it has the aim of further collaboration and research at a local, national and international level in the areas of culture, sport and events. For today's conversation, I am delighted to be joined with the founder of Scottish Women in Sport, Maureen McGonigle, and we are going to be talking about the role of women they play in sport, leadership, perception of women in sport, inclusion, gender equality, and I'm sure lots more within Scotland and Scottish sport. So just to introduce myself, my name is Dr. Briony. I am a lecturer here at UWS in events and marketing. My research mainly examines areas of sport, sport event legacies, impact, the power of sport, and equality, diversity and inclusion, just to name a few. So hopefully, well, I am absolutely sure that we'll have a great conversation today with Maureen. And like I said, thanks so much for joining us. So perhaps you'd like to introduce yourself, Maureen, as the founder of Scottish Women in Sport, and well, we can see where our conversation goes.
Yeah, thank you for the invite in the first instance, and yeah, all the roles that you do sound very similar to what we're trying to work on here. So my name's Maureen McGonigle, and I'm the founder of Scottish Women in Sport, which was founded in 2013. Been in sports administration sort of for many years now, and well, this will be the last one. This is the last hurdle, but really enjoying it at the moment.
Yeah, great. I mean, I think that you've given a lot to the development of, the role of women in leadership, like women and girls, I suppose, as well. We've briefly spoke about research or things that have happened over the last years, and especially over your career, thinking of the changes that have happened. And if this is going to be the kind of final, the final step for you, it must be, I suppose, good to look back on, but also there's still a bit of work to do there.
You couldn't put it better. It's amazing to look back on, because I had so many opportunities, and they probably stick out more because you were the only woman in that space at that time. And for some reason, something inside, I mean, I always felt, and I didn't know what it was, but I always felt that, if you were excluded for certain things in your life, that really irritated me. I couldn't understand why. And most of my working life in terms of sport was with Scottish women's football, and that was for 20 years. And I came across so many instances there. So I look back and I can see all those things, and that's probably one of the benefits of being older, because you can remember them. You were there when they happened. And I look at just now and I think, oh, that is amazing. It's amazing, but it's still not right. We're still hearing of things that are just so easily changed to give equality, and I can't understand. I mean, I really do have difficulty understanding why people think women aren't worth the same as men. That's the bottom line. People look at women and think they're not worth it. Man's doing that job's much more worth a woman doing that job. Why?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, in Scotland, we have some quite visible women in sport, I suppose, like kind of leadership and, Judy Murray and different people. And I know that there are quite a lot of people that are perhaps quite high up, but again, that doesn't always expand to the roles that really make a change. And in that boardroom, or in that, I'm sure in lots of environments that you've sat in, to achieve equality, one of the statistics I think we were talking about the other day, that it would take another 25 years to get there. And it just seems that there are changes, but.
Yeah, I mean, when you've got the likes of, say, Judy Murray, you've maybe got Catherine Granger, you look at Louise Martin, people look and think, well, what's the problem? There's a woman there. Mm-hmm. But the problem isn't, these one individuals that reach the top, who have battled their way to reach the top. Exactly. It hasn't come to them on a plate. They're not part of a an old boys network that sees them through this. But it's underneath, it's what's coming up underneath. And we did carry out research with the observatory, the Scottish Observatory for Sport last year, because one of the bees in my bonnet has always been, if we have a balanced board, and I'm talking about inclusion in the wider sense, not just male, female, but a wider balanced board, because lived experience when you're making decisions, I think helps you make a better decision if you've been in that place yourself. So if we've got that kind of balanced board, money's on the table, what campaigns do we do? Who do we do? What do we do? We get a balanced campaign that reaches out to every aspect of our society, but we're not having that. And what we found within our leadership, and I felt that to me was the main issue, because of the decisions made at the top filtered down, it changed that. It changed the base, it changed the foundation. But again, it also sent out a stronger message that people were welcome in that space. So we had the Observatory for Scottish Sport carry out research for us last year. It was very kindly funded by an author, Stephen Lother, who he wrote the book Arrival, which was about the women's national team getting to the World Cup in France in 2018. And the profits from that he invested into the research on our behalf, which was really kind of him. And I wasn't sure what I was going to get. You know, I wasn't sure, but the headline stats that came out, basically, you know, at the rate of pace in the past 5 years, it will take 25 years before there's change. I think it showed in terms of women on boards that the numbers had increased. Mm-hmm. So certain sports were saying we have to have a woman in our board, or let's make room for a woman. But what they weren't doing was saying, you know, let's look at our board, let's get it balanced, because there hadn't been a drop down in terms of the number of men. So I think the stat that we've got is that 67% on boards are male. Now, our conference last year, you get all your years mixed up with COVID, don't you? But our conference last year was about the 51% club, because that's what women are. We're 51%. But none of the figures actually show anything near that. I mean, one of the biggest worries, and I'm not best in remembering figures and numbers, but there was a drop down in terms of coaches. Now, how important is it that females have a female role model as a coach? Not just as a visibility, but now we're understanding more about the female body and how it works, and the best time for athletes to prepare, to do this, to do X, Y, and Z. Can a man tell you that? Has he been through it? Does he experience it? So there's a huge space out there that needs to be populated by females to bring equality into sport. And given that the numbers are dropping, you know, and young boys and girls are looking elsewhere, I think we need to work collectively together to ensure that we can bring them in.
Yeah, absolutely, because I think as well it's that representation, and you know, you mentioned there not solely on gender, but seeing someone who you can relate with and someone who represents your life, your background, your, you know, whatever it might be, and having that equality across the coaching, across the boards, across, so the decisions that are made represent, you know, the communities that we have across Scotland. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's that, you know, it links to visibility, but having that representation and also coaching and, you know, being part of, you know, officiating, coaching, leading, all those things. It's not just about playing sport, you know, it's being part of, you know, I think, you know, for me, when I look at my research, I don't necessarily look at the sporting events as such. It's the wider impact it can have on involving people in community, or volunteering at some, you know, sporting events, or maybe you done a little bit when you were younger and then you became a coach and now you don't necessarily play or participate, but that role that sport can play in people's life is, you know, is vast.
Yeah. And I think it's understanding the barriers that keep women from progressing in sport, and they can be varied. And I think, you know, they're not barriers. They're hurdles that we can overcome. They're not there and they're not unstoppable. We just have to be a wee bit more flexible in our approach and our delivery and whatever, and to ensure that those hurdles come down and people are there and they're there for the right reasons. I'm not advocating that we put women there that don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, of course.
But why would we think that 51% of the population don't know what they're doing in terms of numbers?
Yes.
You know, you're telling me that, you know, men are smarter than women are in terms of decision making, and we've got, so yeah, it's a bit of a irritant, and I'd like to see it change.
Yeah, because I think it's not, you know, you don't want just to be the token woman that's there because they need to tick a box or you know, something like that. It's like it's the best person for that job in that role, and if you know we're trying to increase participation in women and girls, you know, specifically when we're talking about that today, and then that leads to progression, that leads to leadership. But you have to have, like you said, there are people who are good and like suitable and appropriate for these jobs, because you know, despite of being a woman as it may be.
I mean, I suppose you'll have heard that, you know, if a man sees an advert for a job and he can do, I don't know, 7 out of 10, he thinks, well, that's perfect for me, I can do that role. If a woman sees it and she thinks, well, gosh, I can only do 7 out of 10, I probably can't do that role. So in terms of something else we're working on, I'm taking the conversation slightly away from it, but we're working with SAMH, Scottish Association of Mental Health. It kind of comes from our report because, you know, that stands there, that's figures. We can't really influence that too much. The sports themselves have got to influence. So, you know, we can work with them to look at how they put out their adverts, how they promote themselves, what they do in terms of visibility when they're promoting sports. If you're always going to just see young boys and men in pictures, women are going to say, well, that's not for us. But what we wanted to do is maybe drill down a little bit deeper. So we're putting together a mentorship scheme to help young women have the confidence, A, to go out into the broad world, but B, hopefully to challenge for roles within sport and change these numbers. And we sent out a survey. We were hoping for about 50 responses and we got 76, so we're quite pleased to have as much again. But it was amazing, the lack of confidence that was identified within that survey that young women had about themselves, about what they could do and about their ambitions. And we brought a few of these young women together for an expert panel group. They've been helping us put our thoughts together because no point old people like me sitting telling young people what they need. It's such a different world. So we've been working with them and we've been listening to them. And, you know, they've come across some instances that you think, I didn't think that type of thing would still be happening in this day and age. But they do need to have that bit more confidence to go out into the world. So it's a catch-22, you know, we need to make it a welcoming environment, and then we need to work with the young girls to ensure that they feel strong enough to go forward.
Yeah, definitely. And do you think that then would be, you mentioned about kind of barriers that are not barriers, they're just ways that we need to try and you know, break them down and see where we can go? Do you think that would be one of those kind of hurdles?
Yeah, to me, that's one of the easiest ones. You know, it's not difficult to have you know, if you're promoting a competition, you're promoting an event, get a balance within your publicity material. I mean, it really is quite good, and perhaps people don't recognise it, which is good as well, because they're just taken for granted. But I think that the BBC tend to do quite a lot, and you see different men, women, able-bodied, disabled, Black people, you know, white people, all different types of people. I think they're doing a good job in terms of the visibility. I don't know what lies behind it, but I don't think it's difficult. It's not difficult for anyone to do that, to make the space feel welcoming. But if sports are having difficulty, they can't understand why they're not attracting them, because a lot of the answers would be, well, we tried to get a woman, but we just couldn't get a woman. I mean, I heard that for many years in the Scottish FA. So my 20 years work was with women's football. And when I went into that space, because I was running the Women's Association, I automatically had a place on the Scottish FA Council, which again, I was the only woman in council, well, the first woman in council, the only woman in council. And I've lost my track a little bit, but I'll get there. Yes, I think that a lot of sports say we can't get women come in. You know, women are not interested, and you say they're not interested because they're looking at your environment. It doesn't seem welcoming. It doesn't seem as if it is what's the word I'm looking for? But adjustable. You know, will we always meet every Friday, such and such a time? And you've got to be there, and if you're not there, you're out. You know, it's let's be flexible. Let's move with people. Perhaps COVID's done us a great service in terms of people are communicating much more online, so it gives people opportunities to be in a space that don't have to physically be there. But these things they're easily overcome, and to me sometimes they're just excuses.
Yeah, I think you're right. And perhaps with COVID and that idea of flexibility will, it might provide some more opportunities with the kind of flexible working or non kind of place-based locations. You know, you can be on Zoom, you can be on doing things like that. But I do think that it has to be more progressive. You know, it has to be. And I think that, there's an element of the transparency in decision-making processes, which is good. I talk to my students a lot now about, we can find out a lot of information about events and the policies and the strategies that they're putting in place to try and make these big events perhaps more equitable and more inclusive and more, what are they doing? Who are the communities they're speaking to? Who are they getting involved in the host cities, for example? And we have that information now. It's people have to tell you, it has to be transparent. They have to have their numbers, they have to have the documents that you can go and see. So I suppose that the sharing of information is hopefully making a difference there as well.
You find, many larger organizations can have wonderful policies. They can have them wrapped up and, delivered in beautiful packages. The policies are important, but it's the delivery of what's in it that really is going to make the difference. And I think sometimes, they spend so much time working on this great policy. The implementation goes by the by. And perhaps it goes back to primary school, even before that. We talk about nature and nurture in terms of boys and girls, and I still don't know. I mean, I've got two granddaughters and a grandson, and there's an age gap there. My grandson's 9, but when he was little, when he was about 3, and when I say when he's little, because he's 9 and he's a giant, but I remembered walking down with him. We were walking past a football park, and I says, well, look, there's where the boys and girls play football. And he said to me, Gran, girls don't play football. And I'm thinking, I've had 20 years working in women's football, and there's a grandchild of mine saying girls don't play football. I says, yes, they do. He says, no. I says, well, what do girls do? I say, girls play golf. Because at that point, 5-6 years ago, his dad would be watching football on the television, it'd be men, but there would be women's golf on television. Okay. So he'd actually seen that. Yeah. And I thought that was really quite interesting. He was only 3. He came to that decision in his own head. So I think what we have to do is start at base level when kids come out, have our expectations. I mean, a lot of the issues with young women and girls in sport is there are no expectations that they can achieve. So they're not pushed or supported in that direction because it's only women's sport, and you can't make a career out of that. Why the heck not? We'll go back to the fact we're 51% of the population, probably more holders of the purse strings in a family environment. So it just doesn't make sense. So yes, I'm not moaning, because I do see major differences. I think they're great. I think they're amazing. And I'd love to be starting off now, having the same opportunities. But then on the other hand, it was quite nice just to be that little bit of a pioneer, you know, so I don't know. I don't know which one I'd prefer.
Yeah, no, well, I think that, you know, like your role was needed when it was, you know, so I think it would be different if you were to go back now, like you said. I think that you're definitely a pioneer and getting where we are today, and, you know, even recognising the space for needing, you know, Scottish Women in Sport charity in 2013. Well, it doesn't seem like that long ago, but, you know, it's there's a few years there now that you've been building that up, and, you know, making change using that platform as well. And I think that it's yeah, it's so important. And even, you know, on wider, was it the last couple of weeks when they were talking about the women in football getting maternity cover and maternity leave and different things like that, and you think, how is that just a thing now? You know, we're in 2022, and all these little changes, again, it's not that we're, you know, dismissive, it's just that there's still more to do. Interesting about your grandson there as well, because we took my daughter to football and it was actually half and half, but she decided it's not for her just now. So fair enough, you know.
Yeah.
But it was good to, you know, she can go do that if she wants. And
That's what it's all about, equal opportunity.
And I feel like raising a girl in this kind of environment, like, I'm very aware of that she gets all these opportunities, and it's not, you know, separated or segregated or anything like that. And I think that it's a really important role that, you know, people like you have played to get to this point, and then also that your charity does, and that everyone that you've got on the board, and, you know, we mentioned the digital board and different things like that that can involve people in a wider, you know, from everywhere, really.
Yeah.
They want to.
I mean, it's strange because, you know, we sit here as Scottish Women in Sport and moan about the lack of gender balance, which is something we don't really have in our own board. And it's not, again, through the want of trying, but we have 3 men involved. We do make sure that, and we're currently going to interview this afternoon to bring in more people to support the boards. But I have worked very early doors with University of West of Scotland. They've been really quite influential in the growth of Scottish women in sport. Back to our very first big campaign, Girls Do Sport, and that kind of came from This Girl Can.
Yeah.
And you sat here in Scotland looking at the money, looking at the campaign and thinking, wow, why was this not 4 nations getting together, understanding we've all got the same problem, let's all put a bit of pot of money in and benefit from this. I know we're devolved, great, but there must be at some points we can overcome these issues and work together collaboratively. So we missed out on that. Gosh, I can't remember how much they had. They had tons and tons of money. We managed to find £10,000 of a grant to do this Girls Do Sport. Worked with the University of West of Scotland with the Media Academy down in Ayr. And we put out a shout out to sports. We had 27 turned up to hear what we had to offer. And we chose 9. And what we did with the students with those 9 sports, there's a little studio down in Ayr. So we had a sort of audience at the back, and we had a couple of the people from the sport, and we ran that kind of thing. And then the students went out and covered the sport and did some sort of really great filming on it. You know, we had sailing and some beautiful filming there. We had rollerblades because, again, we wanted to try and showcase as many different types of sport, not necessarily the ones people know about. And that was really, really good. But we, as an organisation, we have tried and not succeeded in trying to get funding from, you know, the statutory bodies that people would expect us to get funding from, to take that type of thing and roll it out further. So everything that we do is self-funded, you know, through our conference and through our awards dinner. These are only 2 events that bring us money in. And because we don't deliver sport, so we're not going to delivering something, when we go into the Sam H mentorship programme, that will be the first time we do that. It's very, very difficult to get grant aid from the normal funders because we can't quantify numbers. We worked with X amount of people and X amount of organisations. So from that point of view, we're probably looking to move in a slightly different direction to enable us to bring some sort of funding into the organisation, because, well, it's going to be 10 years next year, 2023. Can't believe it. So it would be nice to know that, as I sort of tend to think that I should move more and more away from the front line, that there'll be a role there for someone who can get paid a suitable income for the role that they're doing. Yeah. So that's a hope for 2023.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, if you think about when you started this 10 years ago, I think that's a lot of growth, and hopefully a lot of a lot of impact that you've been able to. I don't know if it seems that, does it seem like you've done? Is it a lot? Is it where you want to be? What did you think?
I don't have the answer. Yeah. First of all, I can't believe that it's 10 years next year. Where did they go? I haven't got a clue. And when I started, I'm probably the worst subject to talk about doing anything like this, because I didn't have a plan. I had an idea. I had a name, and I thought what I would do, because I'd been made redundant from Scottish women's football. That would come to an end. And the idea really was just to create a wee bit more info around social media. So we did a lot in terms of retweeting, so people knew what was going on, and speak to newspapers to see if we could get a bit more coverage. And that was as far as my thought process went. But as we've gone through that process, now different people have come in and out the organisation as trustees and supporters. That focus has changed. And I would think within the next coming of years, there'll be a strong foundation put down in supporting other organisations and what we've learned and the best way to tackle this sort of inequality. And I really look forward to seeing that. But I just, I can't really answer your question, because I don't know what. When I look back, I think, gosh, that's not much for 9 years. But then you'd actually forget an awful lot you're done. And it's not all about the big things, it's about the small day-to-day things. But as long as other people think that there's a role there and that it's making a difference, then it's not really my position to judge, because it's not me really that's going to benefit from it, but if other people do. Yeah.
What do you think then would be the role of your charity, but also the role of, or the future of, how we get leadership and women in leadership, and how we get those roles? What do you think the next 10 years might bring, or hopefully?
I do think there's a role for Scottish women in sport. I do think we until we can look at the research, and there's no, you could have 45, 55, you could have it either way. And I'm not looking for 50-50 down the board, it's got to be like that. But until we have that balance, until we have the opportunities, until, females will play sport, get paid the same as men who play sport, all these things that are not happening, we get the same. We pick up a newspaper, 18 pages, let's, play Hunt, the women's story. There's days there's not anything in there. It's not because it's not happening. It's lazy journalism. People don't want to go and find out what's happening,
Sorry, do you think that also comes down to, the money, the sponsorship, the money they get paid, or do you see that, the player?
I don't know if you want me to answer this question.
I know. If the argument though isn't there that kind of controversial, I'm not saying it's my opinion. I'm just, putting it out there as in there's more money there. There's more.
Yeah.
Players get paid more. They're sponsored more. They're, and it's.
Let's be honest. Do you need to own 8 cars?
No.
There's people can't afford to feed themselves, but you can have a different car for every day. So you're entertaining people for a short spell of your life. You're very good at what you do. But does that mean you're worth more than other people? I don't understand that. So we've probably created a rod for our own back in terms of what they've allowed them to. So when you talk about transfer fees and it's into the millions, I think, what are we doing in this world? This is just crazy. So there's plenty of money there. the distribution of it isn't right,
Yes,
and that has to be looked at.
absolutely.
You know, I wouldn't expect those individuals to sit down at dinner and say, well, I'm going to have more food than you because I'm better than you. You know, that's equal. But they seem to think in terms of what they're paid. And who has been driving that? Has it been the fans? Has it been the clubs? Because then again, they get more money when they win. So, yeah, in that level of sport, that very sort of top elite level of sport, the imbalance is going to be difficult to break down.
Yeah.
I don't know how we're going to do that. But as I say, there's probably enough money in there to spread it around and everybody would be quite comfortably off and paid for doing a job that they're good at and that other people like to watch and be entertained by.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as well, when you said, you know, lazy journalism, it's totally true, because who are you representing? You know, if you're that journalist, you know, it's the minority, and okay, maybe that's where most of the fans are, but how are we meant to increase fans, increase attendance, increase participation, and, you know, all those things if it's not, you know, if we don't know about it?
But it's very short-sighted in terms of the commercial side of a newspaper and the marketing side of a newspaper. You know, more and more people are going to social media, and women will read a lot on social media. That's why we use it as a great tool, and a lot of sports do too. But would newspapers stop pigeonholing women into, well, there's a pull-out for women and there's your little black dress and that's how you can fit it, and that's the space you've got. Then if you're a man, there's your 18 pages of sport. It does, you know, this day and age, it doesn't take a brain surgeon to know that is not what people want. Everyone's different and they want a little bit of everything. So it's a newspaper that covers that and covers women's sport extensively, and we'll see where we are. See if the ratings go up. There's a good report from a friend of mine called Jane Dennehy. It's called The Circus Comes to Town. I think it came out in 2012 when the Olympics were down in England. And basically they followed all the newspapers to see, and there was a great surge in the coverage of women's sport, and there's a great surge in the buying of the newspaper. But they also covered it when it finished, and it just dropped like that. You know, why? Why wasn't there somebody saying, see, if we continue with that, we might continue with these numbers buying our paper? It just seems very short-sighted.
Yeah, totally. And there are, I mean, from my side of things, there's limited research that these big events actually have much of an impact on participation.
Yeah.
Regardless, you know. So I do think that in terms of increasing that, and I'm not saying like to get everyone to play sport, but just to the role that sport could play in people's lives, I think that it does have to start more of that grassroots, more of getting to people, you know, not because the Olympics are on, which is a great platform, but we have to find ways to fit it into people's lives, and, you know, to not just be an event that comes and then leaves. We want to understand how it can, how you know, as a kind of everyday, or what place there is, what roles there are, what, you know, people can see it, and like I said, I don't mean like everybody getting on the football pitch. I just mean that there's a lot that goes into sport in the whole of Scotland that can be much wider and more accessible.
I think big events play a great role in, well, it gives you pride if you're from Scotland and we've got Commonwealth Games this year. We're going to look out for Scotland and we want them to win. It's great. It raises awareness of what you can do at elite sense. But it doesn't, I don't think, help participation that much, because sometimes it can be a barrier. And I remember listening back to the 2014 Commonwealth Games in Scotland, and one of the adverts using athletes, female athletes, they were trying to sort of give an insight of what their life was like. Well, I focus on my sport. I don't see my friends. I don't eat chips. I don't do this. I don't do the next thing. And I'm sitting listening, thinking, well, that's great. Everyone's going to say, well, I want to do that. You know, I want to sort of really close myself off to everything else, my friends, you know, whatever sort of food or fizzy juice or whatever you want to have. And I don't think that was encouraging anybody. So I think the stories as you go down the ladder are much more interesting. We have a particular position within our awards. We have an awards dinner every November, which UWS have been supporting for many, many years. And the award that we hold on to, that we don't put out for sponsorship, is Scottish Women in Sport, the Inspiration Sport Award. And you can hear a pin drop every year, because the stories are amazing of what people overcome to participate in sport and how they get involved in sport. These are not people that are working at the elite level and getting paid handsomely for it. They're people who enjoy sport, have found that there were barriers or hurdles to them and have found ways around it. And I really love having that particular awards. And I think those stories would encourage more people than, well, I've not done this, I've focused on my sport and this is my life. And so we've got to kind of separate that if we want to get this. The broader the participation is, the more chance you've got of people coming through to the elite level, because you've got more of them. So let's focus on that. Let's focus on the good that sport can bring to the community, to our society, to our health.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, you know, when you say the elite level as well, I think not even the elite level of the athlete, but the elite level of leadership, the elite, you know, like building, if you end up participating in sport and somehow, and you may then, you know, retire from playing, but there's scope there to build a career, and having those pathways are, you know, are good to see on how, you know, how that would work.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, you know, again, if we're talking about sort of gender equality and moving away from participating in sport and taking on another role, that's again where the flexibility comes in, because at that point, that's maybe where young women are getting married, settling down, having a family. You know, and again, no matter what the stats might say, young women could be looking after elderly parents, as well as looking after a family, as well as trying to hold down a job. You know, so you've got to offer flexibility in terms of taking them onto their coaching courses. You know, we could be using things like Zoom, etc., to do a lot of that now and helping get them through. So it goes back to what we were talking about earlier on, flexibility. Think, you know, how you can work in the bigger picture to help everybody, and then start bringing the numbers through, changing the balance, changing the outcomes.
And for your awards this year, so looking forward to November this year, how are you, you know, how's that coming along? What are the kind of themes that you're looking at? What's
well, it seems so funny, because it just seems as if yesterday was the 2021 awards. Because in 2020 we actually delivered virtually, working with UWS again, and this was absolutely amazing, I have to say. So we did all our awards virtually, and we had an interview with a lady who now lives in New Zealand. Her name is Catherine Switzer, and if anybody wants to do a little bit of Googling on Catherine, she was the first lady to run the Boston Marathon in 1967. So when she put her form in, she put Kay Switzer. So they didn't know she was a woman until she turned up. And she'd been training with her boyfriend, who was a football coach, and there was a crowd of the guys. She was running with them, and the race director got wind of, there's a woman running in this race. How awful. So he jumped in a car and got down to where she was and tried to pull her number off and pull her off the track. And the funny thing is, when I started reading more about it, you know, I'm thinking the name Jock Semple, that sounds like a Scottish name from to me. And he was from Glasgow. So Catherine gave us an interview. We had another lady we had live an interview, Sue Strachan, who is the first female president of Cricket Scotland. 184 years have been going. This was the first time they've had a female president. And we had our 10 awards. And the guys, Gareth and Keith down at UWS and Ayr, they did everything. So I had my friend in Switzerland. She was hosting the room. I can't remember the right word, but it was, you know, whatever, the waiting room. we had Keith wherever he was, Gareth where he was. I was here in Erskine. The presenter was in Paisley. Everybody, and we had 10 people from all over Scotland. And it's amazing. It's on our YouTube channel. You can go and have a look at it. It's really good. And the great thing was about it, 10 minutes before it started, I put on a top, put on a bit of lip and sat in front.
Yeah.
How you doing? Nice to meet you. But it was a bit different for us last year. We went to the Grand Hotel in Glasgow, and we did 10 awards, and it was just lovely to see people and have people in. And our Sportswomen of the Year, GRM Marketing were the sponsor. They were Sportswomen of the Year was Kathleen Dawson, the swimmer, who again, I think something like 90 odd years since there's a gold in swimming. And when I welcomed everyone, I said, it's great to all have you here. And unlike Zoom, you know, we're here and we're all dressed up. If you want to take your shoes off or loosen your tie, you can. And when I spoke to Kathleen before she got presented, because she didn't know she was going to win, she told me her shoes had burst. And she said, as soon as she sat there and said, unloosen your shoes, she says, my shoes burst. And I went, how will you get home? She says, okay, I'm staying in the hotel. So she spent the night without shoes, and then of course got called onto the stage and no shoes on, and I had to explain why she had no shoes. And it was just lovely. It was, everyone just felt part of it, and that was nice. 10 great awards from 10 different people. We had a Pioneer in Sport award this time. It was a girl called Gillian Lyle, who was a rower along with Catherine Granger. We had Sport for Change, so an organisation that I chair called Scottish Sports Futures. No collaboration there. I quite clearly said I have a conflict there. I'm not going to do any voting on it. They won Sport for Change, and they do amazing work in that space. We have young sportswomen, we have coach, we have 10 awards, and yeah, we've got this year for the 18th of November, but the big one will be next year for the 10th anniversary. So it's always a great night. It's always nice, and no matter how well women do on the bigger stage, they still don't seem to get the representation in the awards. And it was really strange just recently with the Brits listening to Adele, and I think there was a 9 out of the 14 categories were women. You know, but women and men are different. We're just a different species. It doesn't mean to say that we're better, worse, or whatever. We're just different. And I personally think it's quite nice to give something for women, particularly women in sport. They don't get a look in elsewhere. So, yeah.
And I'm sure that, you know, fingers crossed this year it'll be a great event, I'm sure, with the
yes there's so much happening. It's always good when there's a year like this, and we're very fortunate because BBC helped support us with videos, so we get some real good action to show in the night. And looking at what's happening in Winter Olympics is just joyful to watch, because it's so colourful, you know, that there's all these colours on the background of this white background, and then we've got Commonwealth Games, we've got the cycling, and all the sort of normal events that go on. So unfortunately football's not there. Scotland didn't make the cut for this year, which is down in England. It would have been fabulous, but there's so much else to choose from.
Yeah, I know. I think that the postponement of Tokyo 2020 actually, I think, has then cut this momentum of, I feel like I've just been watching these, you know, big global sports for months now, and it's great. And then we've, you know, like you said, the Winter Olympics, and then I feel like Birmingham's just, you know, weeks away, and it's months.
We'll sit next year thinking there's nothing happening, because there's been so much happening. You expect it to happen every year.
I know exactly. Yeah, great. So I think that, I suppose finally then, maybe just to close on, is what do you see as, you know, what would be your key kind of message, I suppose, for increasing that, if we look at perhaps leadership, you know, for women in sport, what do you think that really needs to be focused on? I mean, I'm not saying there's one thing, but what would you like to see?
Well, for organisations who receive funding from Scottish Government, Sport Scotland, I think now is the time to say, get your gender equality, get your inclusive policies actually active. Let us see it.
Yeah.
And if not, there's going to have to be pullback in the money.
Yeah.
If that's what's driving people forward, if they need that money, and they've got the policies and they're just not happening, I think that if the sports themselves aren't able to do it and they've had the support, and it's still not happening, we have to look at finance.
Yeah.
That would be for me. It's not going to make me very popular, but the older you get, the least important popularity is, so it's fine.
Strange though, isn't it? It's not the popularity vote that you're looking for. It's the momentum. It's the actual need to make a difference. And I think these topics can be controversial, and they shouldn't be. But in order to make a change, you have to have a voice and say this isn't good enough. This is what we need.
And let's be honest, no one can really now say, I don't know where to go to get advice, knowledge or support on mostly every subject. Mm-hmm. So you can't sit in an ivory tower and have this sort of 90% male, one tick box female and say, oh, I didn't know what to do. Go out there and do it. Mm-hmm. Find ways to do it. We had someone at our conference last year from Changing the Chemistry, talking about how to attract more females into the role of board. So there are different organisations out there. I mean, don't put the blinkers on and think because we're sport, we need to find an organisation that says changing the chemistry in sport. You don't have to. Work with organisations outside your particular comfort zone that can help you adapt the information and the advice they give you to using it within sport. Yeah. So there's so much help, so much advice out there, so many people willing to help, that we should be able to see change happen. Yeah. Quicker than the 25 years that has been suggested through our report.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a good place, I think, to end our recording for today. And again, just say thanks very much, Maureen. It's been great having this conversation with you. Hopefully it'll lead to more, and our partnership will continue with UWS. But been really valuable from our perspective. So thank you again.
I've really enjoyed speaking to you, and anytime I can help, I would be more than happy to do so.
Perfect. Thank you.